China continues to be the leading consumer, and of course he has cited the growth of tea more so in the Asian region, growing by about 5%. Finally, has wrapped it up very well in intimating the Pakistan influence. We all know that more so specifically for the region, we may place it at about 40% in terms of the market share. So that's quite, when these other effects take place, of course tea suffers a great deal. So Mr. Kenneth Kitungulu has put it very well, and now we will proceed on to the next presenter. And the next presenter is none other than Mr. James Montlake, who is the founder and managing director of Tea Swaps Limited. It's a company which helps clients to mitigate tea auction price volatility by use of the tea swap contracts. Tea Swaps Limited is currently operating in Sri Lanka, where it has worked with major tea packers, exporters, plantations, and private factories to avoid uncertainty in the auction prices with fixed price tea swaps. Tea Swaps Limited has also trialed tea swaps in North India in collaboration with the Indian Tea Association, and is in the process of trialing tea swaps in East Africa, referencing the Mombasa tea auction. James' background is in the business development with a specialty in financial derivatives. His experience is in the financial services sector, working for major international investments banks and exchange groups on various asset classes, including precious metals, interest rates, and equities. James has a master's degree in finance and investments from Nottingham University, Ningbo, China. Apparently has quite some wide also background in different continents, so we'll gain from his experience. Welcome, James, and we'll provide you with 15 minutes so that we can have more time for members to ask you more questions. You're welcome for your presentation. May we welcome James. Karibu sana.
Jumbo, ladies and gentlemen. Testing? Oh, okay, great. Okay, Jumbo. Sorry, I'm going to walk around a bit to make this a bit more interesting. My name is James Montlake. I'm Managing Director of Tea Swap Limited, and I'm come to talk to you today about tea swaps. So, tea swaps are a financial hedging instrument which gives you more confidence in future prices. The idea is that you can use a swap to fix a price today for tea that you plan to sell through the auction in the future. So with a swap, you could fix the price for the next 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, even a year into the future, and you will know that if you're a seller, you're either selling above your cost of production, or if you're a buyer, you're buying in line with your budget. This way, you can ensure profitability, and this is why companies around the world from different industries all use swaps as a way of ensuring profitability. But more on that later. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you about the who, what, why, and when of tea swaps. So starting with the who, I'm James Montlake, Managing Director of Tea Swap Limited. 2 years ago, I was lucky enough to be invited to the 3rd African Tea Convention in Nairobi to present on tea swaps, which was very well received. And following that, I traveled to Sri Lanka, where I set up Lanka Tea Swap, which started trading and is currently trading tea swaps in Sri Lanka. And the response there has been very, very good. So lots of large companies in Sri Lanka have started using tea swaps, a selection of which are presented here. We have New Vitanakanda, which is a factory, large plantations like Bogawantalawa, and large packers like Akbar Brothers are currently using swaps to gain more confidence in their future prices. And these are some of the things that they've been saying about T-swaps. If you take a look at this chart, so this shows the volumes of T-swaps traded over the first 12 months of operation in Sri Lanka. And as you can see, there's been a quite significant increase, and in fact volumes are continuing to increase. In total, we have traded 700,000 kilos worth of T-swaps in Sri Lanka, which isn't bad for Sri Lanka. It's an orthodox market. 700,000 is quite good. Based on the success in Sri Lanka, as Mr. Madibo said, I was invited to India by the Indian Tea Association to launch a T-swap trial against the Calcutta auction, which involved many of the major tea companies in India. That was very successful, and in fact, we've actually applied to the Indian government to launch T-swaps in India. Based on all of this experience, I was then very grateful to be invited back to East Africa to launch a T-swap trial project to trial T-swaps in East Africa against the Mombasa auction with the aim of benefiting farmers in the region. So that project was initiated by T2030. It's paid for by the UK government, and it is overseen by PwC, and we're very lucky to have the blessing of IATA to run this T-swap trial project. And I'm very grateful to Mr. Gideon Mugo and Edward Madibo, who have been incredibly supportive and helpful of this process so far. So we have set up this T-swap trial in East Africa, and so far 23 leading companies in East Africa have agreed to take part in the trial, a selection of which are presented here. And basically, the way the trial works is we give everybody a simulated T-swap trade. So everybody is able to trade a simulated T-swap to get a better feel for how T-swaps work and how it can benefit them. We're also very lucky to have a quote from Mr. Joseph Ngije from Kairana Estates. He says, T-swaps have tremendous potential to protect our business against auction price volatility and assist us to improve our financial forecasting. We found the T-swaps to be fairly simple to understand and use, which is fantastic. I'm very glad that he feels that way. So, tea is not the only market to have swaps. There are many major commodity markets which all have their own swap products in a link to them. This is a list of some of those commodity markets. So if we go, for example, coffee, coffee has over £1 billion worth of coffee swaps traded each year, and what those swaps enable farmers to do is fix a price in the future for their coffee and then work backwards to plan out their costs to give themselves the best chance of making a profit. Also, milk, so over £1 billion worth of milk swaps are traded each year, and again, those swaps give price confidence to dairy farmers. And over £7 billion worth of sugar swaps are traded each year. This is globally, again, which gives sugar farmers confidence over their future prices. So in all of these different markets, all of these swap markets, farmers, factories, traders, packers, everybody benefits from having more price certainty and less price risk in the system. So with T-swaps, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're simply taking a concept which already exists in other markets, adapting it slightly, and trying to apply the benefits of it to tea. Okay, so now the what of T-swaps. So what is a T-swap? So, as I said, T-swaps give you price confidence, the confidence of knowing in advance what your future prices are going to be. So if we take a live example, so this is an example from the trial from just a few weeks ago. This is a particular factory, I won't say which one, who is selling PD through the Mombasa auction. And this red line shows their PD price over a 4-week period. Now, as everybody knows, prices in the auction can be very volatile. So here, for example, 1 week they were selling PD up at a price of $3.03, and then 2 weeks later the market had dropped and their PD price is down at $2.68. So this volatility makes it very hard for people to plan in advance. It makes it hard to know what they're going to earn for their tea, and it makes it hard even to know what to offer for green leaf, because the price obviously is fluctuating quite significantly in the auction. But what if, instead of having this volatile price, the factory was able to fix the price in advance, let's say, for example, $2.90, and then they would know that no matter what's happening in the auction, they're always guaranteed a fixed price of $2.90 in advance, and then they can plan their business around that. So that is the confidence that the T-swap provides. So what happens is, the way it works, as a factory, you would continue to sell your tea through the auction as normal. Exactly as normal. It gets given to the brokers, it gets tasted and bid on and sold through the auction. But what the T-swap does is it flattens out these fluctuations. So whenever you're selling above the fixed price of the swap, you would pay that difference back into T-swap. But whenever you're selling below the fixed price of the swap, we would give you a cash payment to compensate for that and bring you back up to that fixed price. So if you look at the screen, let's take that top point as an example. So here, this factory is selling their PD for $3.03. So that's 13 cents above the fixed price of the swap, which is $2.90. So therefore, they would pay that 13 cents back to T-swap. However, a few weeks later, the market has dropped. They're now selling their PD for an average of $2.68. And so what happens is we pay them the difference, which is 22 cents, which compensates for the fact that they've sold their tea below the fixed price in the auction. So no matter what happens in the auction, the ups and downs are mitigated, and they're left with a plain flat price, which we set in advance. It's the same, but in reverse for a buyer. So a buyer can also trade a T-swap. In this case, they're fixing a price for the tea that they buy through the auction. So in the same way, whenever they're buying above the fixed price of the swap, we would pay them the difference in cash to mitigate that. And whenever the market falls and they're buying below the fixed price of the swap, they would pay that difference. They would pay that saving back to us. So whenever they're paying below the fixed price, they pay us, and whenever they're paying above, we pay them. So the idea is that you're protected should the market move against you, but in return, you're giving up the benefit if the market moves in your favor. But you have this certainty in advance. The idea is that you're not exposed to fluctuations in the market, you're not getting into trouble, there's no cash flow shortages, and so ideally it's also not necessary to take on short-term loans or working capital loans if you've already planned out your finances in advance. This is basically the story from the trial. So we started the trial in about week 15, 16, sale 15, 16. Over that time, prices increased slightly and then they continued to dip. So throughout that period, the sellers were very happy because we were paying out to the sellers, and had these been real T-swaps, I think they would have been extremely happy. But that is effectively what the swap does, is it irons out these sudden fluctuations in the market and leaves you with a simple fixed price set in advance. So now the why of T-swaps. Why would you trade a T-swap? So the idea is that T-swaps give you confidence in future prices. So that means you know as a seller you're either selling above your cost of production, or as a buyer you're buying in line with your budget. It's designed to give you the best chance of making a profit. So if you're a factory, for example, that price confidence might mean that you're able to plan your finances better. Let's say you're a bought leaf factory, you can plan your finances better. You know how much you can offer for green leaf. You can ensure that your incomings and outgoings are matched, so your cash flow is stable and you're giving yourself the best chance to make a profit. And it also means that you don't need to go to the bank quite so often to take short-term loans in case the price falls. That's the major benefit for the factory. In turn, that factory can pass that price certainty on to the farmer. that price confidence onto the farmer. So the factory might say to the farmer, we have fixed our price in advance, so therefore we know that we can afford more for our first payment, let's say. So it might be that we can afford to give a little bit more for our first payment because we know what our price is already, or maybe we can give a bit more certainty about what that second payment is going to be. So that price confidence can be passed on to the farmer, and if they offer that to the farmer knows that they can plan their finances better. Maybe their first payment means that they can produce higher quality potentially if the price is good enough, or it might mean that with their second payment, more certainty over their second payment, they can plan their annual finances better, and they can get better access to credit, which is a major thing. One of the major advantages of having that certainty is improved access to credit, and they can plan out their yearly expenses with more accuracy and more certainty. Basically, the idea is that, as we've heard before, where the cost of production is constantly rising, this is a way of enabling factories to offer higher first payments without relying on the auction price to increase. It's an efficiency saving which allows them to offer higher first payments. That is the main advantage of it. If we talk about a buyer, for example, let's say a trader, so the trader is able to fix their price in advance, so they get price confidence. They could take that price and plan their blends more accurately with it. So a trader might be able to say, we know how much we can pay for our blends in advance. That means that we can offer a price to our overseas buyers and lock in a profit margin. It also means that if they can offer longer term prices, because they don't need to buy all the tea in advance and hold on to it and ride out any market fluctuations. They can fix the price for a longer term. They can spread their buying out over a longer period, and that saves them the cost of storage, and it also means that their capital isn't tied up in physical stock. So if the trader offers a longer term price to a packer also benefits from that increased price confidence. So the packer, knowing what their future prices are in advance, can therefore budget more accurately. They know exactly how much they're going to be paying for their tea in the future. So that means more accurate budgets, higher return on capital because they're making a more efficient use of capital, and it also means less market risk. This is very common in the world of swaps around the world. Large packers will use swaps to fix the price of all of their inputs of production in order to ensure that their profit margin is secure and they know exactly how much capital they're going to need. Exactly the same as traders in the coffee market will use swaps to fix their price in advance so their profit margin is secure. It's a very commonly used tool around the world to protect against risk and ensure that companies are giving themselves the best chance of making a profit. So if the packer is happier with having longer term prices, they can potentially give that benefit back to the trader in terms of more orders or more volume, etc. The idea is that T-swaps create a virtuous circle where everybody along the value chain benefits from having that increased price certainty. But just to reiterate, T-swaps are not a physical means of trading tea. The physical tea still gets bought and sold through the auction as normal. The physical process of buying and selling tea still continues in exactly the same way. T-swaps are just a optional addition, a financial insurance product that you can add on to the side of the physical market and ensure that you're protected against the ups and downs of the price. I just want to mention forwards for 1 second. So obviously a lot of companies trade forwards currently, tea forwards. Now forwards and swaps are very different animals. So a forward, for example, is a physical sale. It has a physical delivery. Swaps are cash only, so only cash changes hands. They can work side by side, so they're completely they don't compete with each other. They can work side by side. Sometimes they can even complement each other. But one of the main differences is that whereas currently typically only the larger players trade forwards, swaps is available for everybody. So small and medium companies as well can get the benefit of increased price certainty that comes from trading swaps. So we are TSwap Limited. We are the swap broker. So what happens is whenever we do a deal, we always have to do it in both directions. So we have to have a buyer and a seller. So whenever we do a deal with a seller, we have to match that price with a buyer on the other side. That way, we're not exposed to the market risk, where that money is flowing from one side to the other. So whenever one side is paying, the other side is receiving, and vice versa. We're simply a broker in the middle facilitating that deal. And we make our money through the spread between the two fixed prices. So we don't charge any fees or upfront commissions or anything like that. We simply cover our costs through the difference between the two fixed prices for the buyer and the seller. That's how the business model works. Okay, so now the when of TSwap. So when is all this happening? Well, some of it has already happened. So back in March of this year, we had a TSwap workshop in both Nairobi and Mombasa, which many of you attended, so thank you for that. We then, following that, in April, launched live the simulated TSwap trial. Those first simulated trades were all 1 month each, so they finished around May, at which time many companies then went on to trade additional TSwaps, and new companies have been joining the TSwap trial, and we now have about 23 companies, as I said, participating in the trial. I'm now very grateful to be invited back to the 4th African Tea Convention here in Kampala. The next stage is that we're about to launch a new company, TSwap Africa, which will be based out in East Africa, and it will enable people to trade live TSwaps. So that's going to happen in the next month, and then after that's companies incorporated, we can begin to trade live TSwaps in the region. And we're going to be doing more education and more roadshows going around East Africa and speaking to people and spreading the word about the benefits of price hedging. Okay, so to summarize the benefits of TSwap. So firstly, it's price confidence. It's the ability to set your price in advance and know exactly what you're going to know, that you're either selling above your cost of production or buying in line with your budget, with the aim of increasing profitability. It improves finance, so it improves your ability to manage your cash flows. It means that you don't need to go and borrow short-term loans quite as much. It also means there's no impact. So there's also no impact on physical. So there's no impact to the way that physical tea is currently traded. It's a purely financial insurance product which is added onto the side, and everybody can benefit from TSwap. So all the way from the smallholder farmer up to the large multinational, everybody, as has been seen in other markets, can benefit from reduced price volatility. So thank you very much for listening. Asante sana. These are my contact details. Should you have any questions or wish to take part in the TSwap trial, please send me an email or give me a call on either of those two numbers, and or a WhatsApp, and I'd be happy to take your questions. And I'd also be happy to take your questions now if you have any. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, James, for that. We'll get to the plenary session. I'm sure we'll accord you more time. And we appreciate you already working with 23 companies participating in the Mombasa Tea Auction. And to this end also, you've given us the benefits of the TSwaps and how it works. More importantly so, it's complementary to what we have in terms of forwards, and also complementary to the auction system. It's not a replacement, it is only enhancing. We will, of course, give my participants more time to seek further clarifications in terms of any other matter they may require. But actually from that you can see there are quite some good benefits from TSwaps. And maybe without much ado, I would like to call upon Mr. Joseph Wagura. Mr. Wagura is the Regional Manager in charge of Africa for the Ethical Tea Partnership. Mr. Wagura has worked with the Ethical Tea Partnership for the last 13 years, taking the lead in the project management that go beyond certification Among them is the improvement of factory efficiency, both in energy utilization and operations excellence. Factories are helped to identify areas that can be improved in order to save the energy used, and both thermal and electrical. Mr. Wagura has spearheaded the work in climate change, adaptation and mitigation among smallholder farmers to increase their resilience to climate change. Notably, the smallholder farmers have delivered their crops production, reducing significantly the reliance on tea as the only income generating project. This way, farmers earn extra income even when tea is affected negatively by the changing climatic conditions. I think to this end, Mr. Wagura, maybe you've done much in the Kenyan context. You'll also do quite a lot in the Ugandan scenario, going by the discussions I've had with the leadership. So with that, join me in welcoming Mr. Joseph Wagura to make his presentations. And I'd like to call upon Edward Muriuki to come forward. Karibu, karibu. Edward Muriuki.
Thank you. Good morning. Well, thank you. Thanks. I'll take a short time to take you through what the Ethical Tea Partnership is, and at the same time, what we have done with regards to the effects of the climate change and what probably a factory could do to make a change in the way they operate, and from that change be able to make savings in terms of the amount of energy they use. Now, yesterday we had Professor Washira, who took us through about the knowledge about climate change. So it is not in doubt that climate change is happening, and there are reasons as to why it is happening. Now, climate change is as a result of our activities, including agriculture, the way we operate, including agriculture, such that there is emission of the greenhouse gases, the GHGs. The most common one is the carbon dioxide that comes from combustion, of which our activities in the tea industry do bring about combustion. Carbon dioxide, among the many other greenhouse gases, is the most stable. It takes long, it is stable, and it will be able to survive for a long period of time. So that means it has a longer residence time. It will keep longer, and with that, it is able to form that blanket just above the earth, such that light from the sun is able to get to us. But when that light gets to us, is of course converted into heat. From light energy to heat energy. And from that heat energy, that heated air needs to escape. But the layer of the carbon dioxide at the top is not penetratable by that heat. And that heat remains here with us, and that is what is resulting in an increased temperature. That increased temperature, as Professor Washira said yesterday, if it happens in the sea, the wind blows in the wrong direction, not in our favor, the rains will be in Malawi. Like last year, like this year in Kenya. For a long time, our rains have been held in Tanzania. But recently, the rains have been able to get to us, albeit quite delayed. So the impact of that is quite big. And that way, that is what brings about the climate change and our activities, because that carbon dioxide ought to have been sequestrated or taken up either by the soils or be taken away by photosynthesis. But our activities, again, cutting down of the trees without control. This is not an accusation to the tea industry. It happens everywhere. That uncontrolled reduces the sequestration of carbon dioxide, and therefore it is finding its way up. But what are we doing as Ethical Tea Partnership? So the Ethical Tea Partnership exists to make the tea industry sustainable. That is ensuring that whatever we do does not negatively affect so much our activities. We also exist to improve the lives and livelihoods of the smallholder workers, of the workers as well as the smallholders in the tea industry. And of course, the environment in which we live, to ensure that we are able to sustain ourselves and be able to keep even with changes in climate. So the members of the Ethical Tea Partnership are membership organization. They range from about 50 members, ranging from small tea packers to multinationals likes of Unilever, Taylors of Harrogate, Tetley, Tesco, and others of which are represented here. So big companies to small companies. Our work is not only within the Ethical Tea Partnership, so we work in collaboration with so many other organizations because our work covers across the wherever tea is grown in the world. So we have Tea Association of Malawi as some of the examples, the GIZ, Rainforest Alliance certification, the Sustainable Dutch Initiative, the IDH. We work in collaboration with them in different projects to ensure that whatever we do reaches both the workers and the smallholders. We saw those maps yesterday with Professor Washira, and that is the east and the west of the Rift Valley, different times of the year 2050 and 2010. It shows that a real change, especially around the west of the Rift Valley, it will be negatively, totally affected by 2050, and that area will totally reduce around where tea is grown, that is around Nandi, unless something has been done already and it is continuing to be done for that not to happen. It doesn't have to happen. It can be stopped. Otherwise, when you go look at the eastern side of the Rift Valley, the Mount Kenya region, unless we go further into the mountain, which is not allowable, that area also will also shrink and remaining with a few green areas that tea will continue to grow. We work within the Sustainable Development Goals on climate change, on climate action, as well as making sure that people do access energy and not necessarily from the grid, because energy from the grid means probably burning fossil fuels, releasing more carbon dioxide, and getting us again into the vicious cycle. Now, what have we done? In support of that, we have worked with the largest organization probably in the world that deals with smallholders, the Kenya Tea Development Agency, in making the farmers aware of the existence of the fact that there are changes within the climate, so that these farmers are trained on adaptation to ensure that they change the way they do business in growing the tea, because that has to happen. They have to change. If you consider that KTDA has about 600,000 farmers, all supplying to different factories, the impact that a given factory will have, especially the smallholder farmers, collecting fuel wood and cutting down trees, is more than what the factory has to do with fuel wood. So the smallholders play a bigger role in destroying the forests if it's not checked. So they have been trained on adaptation, just to also to reduce the reliance on tea, because it is changing. In the event that those maps are proven true by the year 2050, and that area is changed, what will the farmers be relying on for their income? So they need to change the way they conduct business, diversify into other crops, diversify into other means of income, and not entirely rely on tea. Water harvesting, very important. When the rains come, we harvest water and store it, because that way, during the dry season, you'll be able to use that water either for irrigation or for your own consumption, so that those impacts, especially that dry season, you are safeguarded against negative effects. The energy efficiency stoves, just to reduce the amount of fuel wood that you're using to prepare food, because it is important. Looking at a factory that probably has over 24,000 farmers, all of them getting into the forest to get fuel wood, that will have a huge impact. But if you have the energy saving stoves that will use less fuel wood and still be able to achieve the preparation of food, that way you'll be able to reduce the cutting down of the trees, and the sequestration of carbon will be far much better if you have more trees. On energy efficiency, to reduce the amount of energy that you're using in a factory. Simple things like putting your fuel wood under shade to ensure that it is properly dried before use, splitting the firewood to ensure that it is properly drying as well, and proper stacking under shade to ensure that when the rains come, it doesn't get wet again. And when stacking, it's also split so that drying happens. If we are able to use fuel wood at anything below 25% moisture content, then the calorific value will be far much better. Use less fuel wood on your boilers, and with less fuel wood, less trees cut, and with that, you'll be able to save about 300,000 trees per year. With that kind of a saving every year, then the maps may not come to fruition. It might change. And of course, if you have savings on energy of that kind of a figure, 3.8 million US dollars, then you have a chance to survive in the industry, in the competitive world. Operational efficiency, it is something that we're doing in the factories to ensure that we are efficient in the way that we manage the factory. Simple things like changing the lighting from the normal bulbs to LED bulbs, using solar energy into the security lights rather than the grid. It's difficult to, I know it's debatable to talk about whether you can use solar to do your withering, but some companies have done it. But if you go for the easy ones, like security lighting, that will come in at night, if you have the solar lights, then you'll be able to have a huge saving in terms of how much energy you're getting from the grid. And less energy from the grid means that there are less fuel, there is less fossil fuels burned, and less carbon, more trees in the field, and more sequestration. And that way, we have huge, huge savings. We run this program in different countries. In Malawi, there is the energy audits, just to tell you where your factory is. Energy auditors carrying out the energy audit just to tell you where your factory is and what are the recommendations that are expected for you to make that change. Asian countries as well, Rwanda, Asian countries in India, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and China, all this happening to ensure that there is that reduced use of energy. And recently, on 13th of June, we had meetings with the CEOs of the different buying companies, presenting a business case for financing options to ensure that if we get the finances, then these companies in the producing countries will be able to benefit from such savings, and then the tea industry will remain longer. And as I said, the maps may be proved wrong, and with that, then the tea industry will be able to remain for now, beyond 2050, and even beyond many more years within the world. I beg to stop there, and I invite my colleague to take us through more on what is done with regard to climate change. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for that. I have my presentation. I also need to be assisted at these. Anyway, before it's sorted out, I'm a carbon project developer, and developing a carbon is making sense on what was presented yesterday on issues of climate change, plus what has been presented by my colleague. And one of our greatest market for carbon is the aviation sector. If you look at your airlines, they have an ecological information. So we expect that you're going to be the first customer of yourselves and your farmers. So I think by the time, still as we wait, there are negotiations that are going on currently. Government are negotiating about what is going to go into the carbon markets. And according to reports yesterday, there's something called Coronovia Joint Work on Agriculture under UNFCCC. And I was reading the report. They have a draft conclusion. And in the draft conclusion, Green Climate Fund, it's going to work with the agriculture stakeholders to develop climate strategies. In Kenyan context, what I expect is AFA, as a private sector, we're going to work with AFA. Oh, my presentation. I think I would. Oh, you don't have it. Okay, I understand my presentation is not there. So, this thing how will I explain the model? I would like to get customers here. So, so I was explaining about UNFCCC. So the government have already done a draft conclusion. There's going to be a great interplay between the agriculture sector and the Green Climate Fund. Green Climate Fund in Kenya is hosted by the National Treasury. As a project developer, it's going to be very important. There's a challenge that is coming on board. We are the millennials. You are the old generation. Not yet old, the old school. I would say the old school. The old school. When we go to the aviation sector, those guys dealing with carbon credits are guys my age. So we can speak. If they don't agree with me, I'll able to speak to them in a way that I'll not be begging. It's like telling them, hey, what's up? So, considering where I come from Kangaita, Kirinyaga, and my project zone is within Kangaita, Kemunye, Ndima. That's KTDA. They're the people who are there. And we have a challenge. We go to the factories and they tell us we have our own policies, we have to go up. But today I'm lucky I have the management here. They don't speak our language. We want to do things fast. They want bureaucracy. Doesn't work for us. The airlines right now, I would have explained how the model meets. They are offsetting what the European route. And when I do my analysis, the market in European that is ready to pay for carbon credit, that has to pay for carbon credits, it's the high end. For us, the high end is what we are targeting. And so there's an interplay. I would have shown how we're using it, so I have to redo my brain. we're using art to reach out to the clients. In art, you're going to get young guys who know how to draw very well. And the other technology we're using is virtual reality. Virtual reality is placing a camera there at the middle, and the clients on the other side who are watching, as the people are drawing, they can experience the whole room. So once we do that, we expect that the farmers we are working with, and for this case the young guys, they are going to get payment for carbon credits, and they're going to get payments for their tea products, and you're going to make money from the CSR activities. Those are 3 streams of income. The other thing, and when I was presenting, there is the conversation towards the consumer, and there's a conversation of the producer. You see, on the consumer side, they are being forced by law to offset their carbon footprint. On the producer side, it is the government policy that is pushing action to climate action. So for me as a project developer, I've come up with a project that speaks for the producer and at the same time meets the needs of the consumer. And so, calling for investment, we're having a football tournament in Kirinyaga called the Kirinyaga Carbons Football Tournament. The theme of that football tournament is Sports for Climate Action. The Sports for Climate Action, the theme, Sports for Climate Action, is the sports declaration, the sports industry declaration for climate action. And we're looking at how do we link our activities to sports, the sports industry. And for that case, the World Cup. I would invite you, for now that we have those declaration, that we can have a generic kind of promotion, not an individual company promotion, but a generic promotion with issues of climate change. And for that, we're targeting especially European market. I think it's good. Those from Europe, we can do business. Please offset your carbon footprint with our project, and we give you good teas directly. That's a story, a branding story that was there yesterday. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Edward Ngari. I'll say a little bit about him. Yesterday you intimated we don't have youth presenting. This time we are disapproving in this particular convention that we brought in Edward Ngari, if I may say a little bit about him. And indeed we'll give him opportunity at some point in time to demonstrate through illustration what really his company does and the initiatives he has within the tea sector. So we'll still give him opportunity at some point, but he has said it. If it's something you do every other time, with or without the presentation, you'll say it as it is. And I think he has done it well. Edward Ngari runs a Kirinyaga Carbons initiative that runs through his company, Escopa Corporation Limited. It entails taking care of and conserving the natural resources, namely the Mount Kenya Forest, Jukini Forest, Morinduko Hill Forest, and the riparian lands of water resources from which farmers draw water for irrigation. This has been linked to farmlands by farmers practicing climate-smart agriculture. His company connects the farmers to the consumers and also focuses in the specialty tea and coffee sectors. So to this end, his company indeed works with quite a good number of small-scale farmers. So there's a different way we can all connect in the initiatives being handled by Edwin Ngari. So to that end, we'll still be able to have that projected. So with that, members, without much ado, I will want to take just 10 minutes, question answers, be concise, be to the point, and then thereafter we'll break for tea. So you have the 4 members before you. You'll ask the question and direct it to the specific person. You're free to do that, and then I will give them opportunity to respond. You don't have to go in any particular order, but kindly note we have just 10 minutes to do this. So be to the point, stick to the point, finish with the point, and so that we can have more people asking questions. Where do we start from? I will start from the right. That row. We'll give you a chance, I think, from those. Then let me just know the number of hands. That's one in this row. Democratically. We are being democratic. Anyone from this row? Thank you. Second person. Then we'll go to the next round. This particular row. Yes, I can see there. Jaggi, Alfred will get, and then down there, Suleiman, Jilo. Thank you. To the total extreme end, so that I'm not seen to be unfair. Is that Ochanda? Dr. Ochanda. I think we've got the, so you know the ones, you know yourselves. So let's quickly have the questions asked.
Thank you very much. My first question is to Mr. Kenneth Kitungulu. We were discussing the changes in global dynamics. I wanted to have his input on the role of artificial intelligence, which is gaining momentum, largely referred to as the fourth industrial revolution. Does it have an impact here in our global dynamics? Then two, we've been talking about trade wars with the major players being the United States and China. I think United States and India also having a bit of a conflict. In our region here, we recently passed our budgets on the same day. There was also an element of protectionism, including tea. We've raised our tariffs. For instance, in Uganda, for imported teas to up to 60%. Do you think that also plays a factor? Is that something that has an impact on our economy? Then I had a question for Mr. James Motley on the swaps. How do we determine the price that we are going to set for my tea? Because if I'm given an option, definitely I will pick the highest possible price as the average. How do we determine the average? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that. And if your question has been asked, don't ask it again and say like he has said. Just admit that has already been taken up. Next.
Yes,
thank you.
Joseph Wakimani, KTDA. Yeah. My question has been asked. The first question about to James Motley, but I had a second one. I saw the trials that you are making in Mombasa has very many companies. How did you choose them, and why some of us not in that setup?
Thank you. That's good. The next person. We're progressing. Yes, Wananjagi.
It has been asked, but just a little emphasis rather, to James Montlake. As a broker, are you the one who determines the ceiling price that a producer or a buyer may pick? Because if out of exuberance I pick $6 or $10, would that be realistic, and is that tradable? Thank you.
Thank you, Njagi. Yes, next there.
Thank you. Our tea product, the moment it leaves the factory, is more of the final product. And we have created an impression in the market, especially back to our farmers, that we have not done value addition. My question is, for how long we as a region, we are going to sell our final product as a low material in the auction? Thank you.
Okay. Finally, Suleiman and then Ochanda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mudibo. My question goes to Mr. Wagura on climate change. For too long, I think we have conventionally continued drying our teas using fuel wood, and we know the impact it has on the environment. Maybe it's time the industry began to explore alternative ways of drying tea. And I have in mind the technology of microwave drying. I wonder whether Mr. Wagura and other environmental experts have thought about exploring this alternative way of drying tea in terms of the advantages it would have in saving the environment and reducing the impact on climate change, vis-a-vis probably also the savings that it might have on processing of tea in the factories, as well as the effect it might have on quality in comparison to drying of tea using fuel wood through boilers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Suleiman. Finally, Dr. Ochanda.
Thank you, Mr. Mudibo, for giving me this opportunity to ask Mr. Montele. Your TSOX is coming in very handy at a time when prices are dipping. My question is it going to affect the auction such that probably the catalog will be labeled T-swap teas, and then if not, if it is on direct sales, how is the model going to be getting the benchmark that probably is matching the tea trade? And then I had another question for Mr. Joseph Waruga. It's probably connected to the question that has been asked. In order to save energy, is something being worked on, probably in redesigning factories so that we can use solar energy in processing, especially in the withering section? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, members. And with that, I'll call upon the different members. You've noted your areas, so we will start with Kenneth to take us through the financials.
Excuse me. Thank you very much. So I was asked two questions. One around the role of artificial intelligence in Africa or in East Africa, specifically to the tea industry. I would rather answer it on a broader perspective and speak to the role of artificial intelligence in trade and in general. We're seeing a shift, and the buzzword currently is about blockchain and the value of blockchain. In banking, for example, we're starting to see the use of blockchain in confirming transactions and easing trade and movement of documentation between parties. So yes, artificial intelligence is here with us, and it has a significant role to play in any trade sector. It should ease in the process of document transfer, document confirmation, etc. And that should also account for the tea business as well. The second point around trade wars, I wish there was a politician from the Ugandan government here to answer such a question. But in a nutshell, it's important, I think, for all of us to appreciate what the spirit of those increments were. Yes, in the recently read budget, and specific to Uganda, there were a lot of, you can call protectionist tendencies around imports. There is, as we enter into any election period, with Uganda's election now less than 2 years away, there is a drive to promote local consumption, so-called Buy Uganda, Build Uganda acronym of BUBU. So as a result, on any product that is produced to a certain extent in Uganda, there was an increase in taxes levied on imports of that product. However, we need to look at the broader context. Uganda and Kenya still remain the largest trading partners. 46% of East Africa community trade is between these two countries. In just 2 months alone, and the beginning of this year, $1.5 billion worth of business was done between the two countries. The component of that tea accounts for, given that Uganda is already an exporter of tea, I don't believe will be relevant enough to affect the Kenya tea industry. So my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Montelek.
Thank you very much for your questions. I'm so sorry. I should have mentioned about the way that we set the fixed price for the swaps during the presentation. No matter how many times I practice, I always end up forgetting something. So I'm sorry. I should have said that already. But basically, the way that the fixed price of the swap is set is through the swap market. So we must have agreement between the buyer and seller of the swap. So the way it works in practice is that we, TSwap, would do our analysis of the market. The way it works in Sri Lanka is we have a statistical model which comes up with a suggested price for what we think a particular tea will, or a factory, let's say, or a mark, will achieve in the auction over the period. And then we would suggest that price to the buyer and the seller, and then they have the option of either accepting that or rejecting that. So if both sides accept, if both buyer and seller accept the price, then we have a trade. If both or either side reject it, then we have to go back and look at the price again and try and find consensus between the buyer and the seller. So I'm sorry, Alfred, I would love to offer you $10 a kilo, but unfortunately I have to find someone on the other side that's willing to pay that price. So it's set between buyer and seller in the market. The gentleman asked why these companies participate in the trial. Well, and how do we get involved? A fantastic question. We opened it up to everyone, and I'm sorry that if you didn't get a chance to participate. I think we tried to get around everybody. We sent out a circular, I think, to the YATA members. So I'm sorry if you didn't get a chance to take part in the trial. We can continue to run the trial, so if you do want to participate, you're very welcome to. We will continue to run the trial and give people the ability to trade simulated swaps if they want to. So anybody who wants to take part in the trial, please let me know, and we're happy to accommodate you. And the final question, are different lots within the auction earmarked for swaps or not? The answer is no. The swap is entirely separate from the auction process. So and it's also entirely confidential. So you don't know which sellers have traded swaps, what prices they've traded. You don't know which buyers have traded swaps. It's entirely confidential and separate from the auction. It's just like taking out an insurance contract, basically. So you know you've got 100 tons to sell through the auction over the next month. So what you would do is you would come to TSwap and say, can you fix me a price for that 100 tons of sale in the auction? We'll fix you a price. And you continue to sell the tea through the auction as normal. So nobody else in the auction would know that you have fixed your price with a swap. It's entirely separate, confidential, and it doesn't impact the auction in any way, if that answers your question. But I'm very happy to take more questions later in the bar, in the lounge, if anybody wants to ask any other questions. So I hope I've answered everyone's questions there. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Now we'll have Joseph Wagura, and then Edward Ngari will crown it. And given the time factor, I would also like to add that we'll have breakaway sessions tomorrow. There's a likelihood, going by the demand on specific areas, that we may even want to reorganize one of the sessions purely to deal with areas members feel they need further information. So that is possible, that in one of the sessions tomorrow we may want to do that. So don't feel discouraged if you don't get an opportunity to ask at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Suleiman, I want to assure you that I'm not a tea expert, so I'll not be able to answer the question whether the quality will be affected or not, because of my limitation in knowledge about tea. So Suleiman, let me be sure that I'll not be able to answer that. But however, with solar, we have seen companies in Kenya that do have solar walls. And these solar walls, just making that the wall, instead of constructing the normal wall, you use the solar panels just to harness the solar power and then use that solar power to dry the tea. How successful that is, I'm happy to facilitate a visit for you to see that that happens. So solar can be used. In some countries, like in Malawi, they have intentions. They have even companies to make the solar company to to supply the power, but bottlenecks of government protocol, because that requires that probably you sell the power to the power company and then you get it from the power company. Those protocols have delayed that, but it happens and it can be done. Lastly, we, in conjunction with the GIZ and KTDA, we are on the very, very, very early stages of developing a model factory, so that that model factory, the design, whatever that will be done in it, most likely will be able to be the point of reference on all these trials about solar, about fuel wood, about the operational excellence, how to operate the factory excellently, but that will take some time. So, Dr. Chanda, that will take some time to get down that road, and should we get there, we will be happy to let everybody visit as and when we get there. Thank you.
So I think with that, ladies and gentlemen, we've come towards the end of the first morning session, and unless there is it's really burning, I would like that we wrap up there, and then you are free also to consult with the presenters, even as we break for tea. I'll hold them back, so that if there's anything that you'd like to inquire, you're free to do so. I'd also at this stage like to request those who are doing the next set of presentations kindly to stay behind. In fact, all presenters, if you don't mind, you could stay behind so that we ensure we have a flawless, seamless setup as we progress with other presentations. So if you'll not mind those who are doing any presentations between today and tomorrow, just stay behind. And with that, I would like to call upon the Director General of the Agriculture Food Authority, who is also the head of Tea Directorate, Mr. Anthony Mureithi, to come forward. I would like him to make presentations to our presenters here, to appreciate them for the good job well done. Do we appreciate they've done a good job, members? Thank you very much. It's been quite incisive. Quite a lot has been covered. I'll call upon Mr. Mureithi. We want to appreciate AFA-Tea Directorate. They've supported us very much. They've made this occasion also very successful as sponsors, as exhibitors, as participants, as our regulator in Kenya. We work very closely with AFA-Tea Directorate, and that's maybe why it explains how well we've been able to do as Kenya. So I would like other regulators to emulate the same. Karibu Bwana Mureithi. Maybe a word or two before you give the words.
Thank you to the Board of IATA and Management for this very wonderful convention. Participants, good morning. Good morning once again. I think from the government of Kenya, we are indeed very grateful to be amongst you. I have colleagues from AFA-Tea Directorate who will be taking us through some sector issues in this morning and afternoon. We also have a delegation from Nyao Tea Zones Development Corporation, led by the Managing Director, Peter Koril. Wherever you are, just rise up and greet the crowd. Yeah, thank you. I think as we talk about trade, I'm also going to reach out to my colleagues in the region so that we also see how we can talk about matters policy, matters regulations, matters to do with structures of how we work seamlessly. I believe we have a lot of stock, we have a lot of challenges, we also have our various strengths that we can actually complement each other. So I think we shall be talking so that we can see how we can work as seamlessly as possible to address tea sector issues in the region. I do believe you also have a very rich gene bank. At some instances, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Where things work, we make them better. Where you have the challenges, we mitigate them together. So thank you very much and good morning.
Yeah, thank you very much. A hand of applause for Mr. Mureithi again. Nashukuru. So at this stage, we'll have the gifts presented. And the first will be to James Montlake. Then we have Kenneth from Stanbic. I'm sure you are also very excited about the financials. Then our regional manager, Ethical Tea Partnership. And finally, Edward, my namesake. A young person who's devoted his time and life into tea. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And at this stage, I'd like us to break for tea. We're giving ourselves 20 minutes, please. You'll find us started if you delay. 20 minutes, just have a cup of tea and make it back. We can consult over lunch break where we have a bigger period. Thank you once again. Enjoy your tea.
Very good. Keeping it short. There's no
Time. People like it that way. Just did it well. Also the presenter did it well. I may even create some session tomorrow because it's one of the areas. There are too many questions and answers. I will create that session in place of one area. So, but I'll let you know. My director, that's Manyo. Yes. I think he's catching a flight to go to saying his presentation, cost of production analysis. We are not the staff. Okay. But I handled it for him. Yeah. So unfortunately I came in some few minutes late. Yes. But I have the presentation. You have the presentation. So we'll make sure it is there so that we don't fall into that. Thank you. Yeah. And I hope this other flip what has been. No, this one you can test it, eh? You can test it. You'll test it. So for yeah. Yes. Oh yes, pleasure. Thank you so much. Yeah, we've not had chance to have a session, but I know all has been okay. Thank you for making time to come. Your determination is what we require. You're here and we're happy. Yeah, so thank you so much.
By the way, I will make only one presentation.
You'll make one, the other one you'll be, you see you are a regulator also.
Yeah.
So the other one, it's just more, there are two of them, but one is where you'll make, the other one you'll answer questions on your systems, that one on the automation. If there's anything on automation, you can, just to encourage.
You've done a lot of automation.
Yes.
I'll ensure
thank
my
you.
presentation.
Yes, Professor.
Can I?
Yeah.
Can you bring forward my presentation?
He wants to go back.
I'll go in every.
Yes. No, it's okay. We can do that.
Okay.
What yours is at 2, but is at 2.